presenter for this session is Dr. John Torquato, and he hails all the way from Washington State, and he currently is, I believe, director of Total Health Spokane, and which is a medical mission operation there in Spokane, Washington. And they have a wonderful work up there. I believe he's going to tell us some about it, and I'm very excited about this session. He has a really strong passion for medical mission. I know when XCOM has discussed a little bit about medical mission, it's been something that we wanted to incorporate into our retreat somehow, and I'm really excited to be able to incorporate this feature. So I'd like to invite you up. The time is yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad you guys are here, and I get to be here with you. I'm going to just grab something real quick off the side. I have a couple of assistants here in the facility. I'd like them to pass out to you a little bit of a card. It's got a QR code on it, and I want you all to have one. So they're going to come forward and hand it to you, and please make sure everybody gets one. And little card that would be something that I'll refer to as I go. Yeah, it talks about what I do in the area of medical missionary work in North Spokane. Let's try to figure out how to put this in here, if I can do it. There we go. All right, so make sure you get one of those cards. And while you're getting those cards, I'm going to tell you what I know about medical missionary work. Before I do that, I want to share something with you. I have done some study in the Bible, and I've come to a conclusion. As I've done this study in the Bible, I have concluded that Jesus, when he chose the people who would start the Christian church, chose people that were between the ages of 15 and 22. Now, I don't know if that's a shock to you, but I have in my mind the sense that when Jesus called these people, he called old men like me. But he didn't call old men like me, he called young people like you. And maybe you're not 15, but you're pretty close. And maybe you're 22, but it's people between that age group that I believe that Christ himself called to the ministry to begin the church of Christ in this earth. And if we are going to do anything as adults that has significance related to the following Christ's method, one of the things that we can do is we can be where he was. And where he was with people like you. Every one of you has that special place that you have to fill. Christ is calling you to do a work, even at your age, even now, even in medical missionary work. Now, how could that be? I don't have a medical license. I have not finished high school, let alone college. And then what about medical school and residency and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? God is calling you to do medical missionary work today. And I'm going to explain to you how that can happen. You see, the Lord has provided great things out of nothing. And when you have very little, you realize how much you must rely upon Christ for. In fact, I don't know if you know this lady by the name of Mother Teresa. She has a very common quote that I like to quote. She says this, starting with nothing. She says, "We the willing," are you willing? "We the willing, led by the unknown. We the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much for so long, with so little, that we are now qualified to do anything with nothing." My friends, I have learned as an adult not to despise the day of small beginnings. And where you are is in that place. Do not despise the fact that you have a small beginning. Because God is calling you to the medical missionary work, and he began the church of God on this earth with your age group. So let me tell you, the way that I'm going to talk about today, what I'm going to talk about today is, if I were to give it a title, I would call it Young People with Jesus. Young People with Jesus. What can you do as a young person with Jesus? Well, let me start with telling you this. As a parent, I have children. I have 4 children, and they're ranging now in the ages of 26, as my daughter who's in nursing school, all the way down to 17. And so they're a little older than some of you, but they all came up in a home where medical missionary work was happening. And what we did to incorporate medical missionary group work is we did something we called cell group. It was basically small Bible study. And we would take somebody into our home, we would take a small group of 10 to 12 people in our home, including children of your age, and we would have a mixed age group session. And we didn't do any big Bible study because some of the people there didn't know what the Bible was. And they were offended even by the Bible when they started. But we invited them into our home. One of the things that you can do as a young person is to be willing to have people in your home with your parents and to engage with them in friendship and relationship. Now, this is what happened in our cell group. We had people come into our cell group who were not Christians, but they were open to prayer. And you will find that many times people that are not Christians are willing to pray. And so we decided to switch our cell group just a little bit. We began with a little bowl of soup. Can you guys serve soup? Can you make soup? Can you clean up soup when soup has been served? That is work that young people can do with Jesus that is ministry. People would come and they would eat soup with us for half an hour. Then for half an hour I would stand before this group of 10 to 12 people that came every single week for 5 years. 5 years. Now when I say 5 years, we would go during the school year. Every summer was off because we wanted to give people the opportunity to leave the cell group if they felt that they were, it was something that they had to do. We did not want them to feel, there's a certain dynamic that people do. They feel like, if I leave, I'm not your friend. No. It's not like that. We understand life moves on. So if you need to leave, that's okay. But we're going to start up in the fall again when school starts. You're welcome always back. And we did this for 5 years. And the same people kept coming back and coming back and coming back. So we'd have half an hour, we'd eat soup and bread. We didn't want it to be big because it was too much of a deal that the food was. We wanted to keep it simple. Then I would stand in front of this small group of people that were now our friends. Some of these people range from the age of 68 or so, all the way down into the less than 10-year-old age. And one by one, we would go around the circle and we'd say, do you have a prayer or do you have a praise to give to God? Now remember, some of these people didn't know God. And they were the older people. But sitting right next to them would be a 10-year-old. And when it came to the 10-year-old, I would say, do you have a prayer or a praise, Carissa, or whoever it was? And they would say, yes, I have a prayer. I have a prayer for my friend who's having this problem. Or a prayer for my dog, or whatever the issue was. And I would praise that today was a beautiful day. Well, you know what? That was a witness. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. That was a witness. Because sitting right next to them was an unbeliever that didn't know what was happening. They didn't know how to pray. And so after seeing this 10-year-old state what they were praying for and praising for, we go to them. Virginia, can you tell us? Do you have a prayer or a praise? Well, Oscar, I guess I do. I agree with Carissa. It was a beautiful day. Okay, and I write it up on the board. Virginia, beautiful day. And do you have a prayer request? Well, yes, I have some problems with health. Oh, okay, so I write it up on the board. Virginia, prayer request, help. And we would go down the list. Do you think that you can do a prayer and a praise? Do you think you can come up with something without being shy? To say, well, yeah, I know. And be shy if you have to be, but say it. Because your youth is easy for adults to not be offended by. In your youth, it's easy for you to make a suggestion to an adult that they don't get. That is medical missionary work. If you just understood the power of your youth, you would understand that this is a tremendous opportunity. So that you can take this and be a witness to somebody who doesn't know Jesus, and in a circumstance where your parents would set you up, next to somebody who doesn't believe and ask for your opinion, and you can say, I have a prayer. I have a prayer if they registered on the board. And the person next to you taking the direction from a 10-year-old could also have a prayer and a praise. I want to tell you, the woman that was sitting next to my 10-year-old had terminal cancer. She was an unbeliever. What happens to people who die that don't know Jesus? And this woman was destined to die without Jesus. But because a 10-year-old was next to her and she began to pray, she began to have more ease and have a better time and kind of lighten up. And, you know, I sat in that cell group sometime later. And I heard this woman for the first time utter the first prayer she ever prayed to Jesus Christ. And she did it because the people that were sitting next to her gave her an example of what to do. Because she didn't know. Do you think that you could be in a small group in which your parents set you up to say, hey, you have a prayer or praise? Jesus with young people. That is what you can do. It is a witness, and do not despise the day of small beginnings. Well, we did something else in our cell group after we did prayer and praise. Did we study the Bible? No, they wouldn't take the Bible. But you know what we did? We would take Bible principles. And we would begin to say, well, this is what we want to do with our life. We want to give to people. So we're going to do what we call beneficent work. It's a big word. Beneficent work means doing nice things. We would do nice things. And the idea, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of resources. So what did we do? We picked small targets. Really small targets. And we would do two principles. Number one, we did the principle of overwhelming abundance. Where the windows of heaven opened and poured out a blessing so strong that they could not receive it. Well, you know what? If you're talking to a guy that makes $50,000 a year, it's going to be pretty hard for you to make that kind of impact. But when you talk to somebody who's 7 and just lost their mother, and their father is now trying to live in a home that is supporting this girl that has to be with daycare all day, and she doesn't have somebody close to her, and she's lonely and depressed at 7. You think that's a small target? That was a small target. And our group would begin to take week after week after week. They didn't have resources, so guess what we did? We'd ask other people. We said, hey, we got this idea. We didn't tell them who it was. We got this idea. There's a 7-year-old girl, just lost her mom. It's coming to Christmas. Dad is making no money. We want to really bless this child. Do you have something you can give to her? The young people did not have anything to give except influence. They had influence. Do you know what adults do when a 10-year-old goes up to them and says, sir, I want to help somebody else. Will you help me help somebody else? They're like, you want to help somebody? I'm going to help you help somebody. They're going to give you stuff because it's not all about you. It's all about somebody else you're trying to help. And we amassed stuff, brand new stuff, good stuff, money stuff. We had all kinds of stuff. First thing was overwhelming abundance. Second thing, anonymous. We had to do it with stealth. That means with nobody knowing. So we had to somehow get it to this girl without her knowing where it came from. But at the same time, we wanted to see the result. So we had to do it with stealth, with secrecy, but at the same time record it. That was tough. So we made this elaborate arrangement. We found a neighbor who knew the girl but was sworn to secrecy. And we had all this thing where the kids would go out and they would put the stuff all in the same place where the girl would find it. And then the neighbor would have certain things that would happen so the girl would get there and would have her name all over it. And then there was somebody else that would have, like, they would be in a car like across the street with a telephoto camera, and they would take a picture and video of what was happening and have a microphone that would, like, boom, kind of, it would be what they call a mic that would get a long distance, and we recorded it. Do you know how much fun that was? That was so much fun. And guess who did it? The young people. The young people with Jesus. Because you have influence. If you only knew what adults would do for you if you asked them. And especially if you weren't asking for yourself, but if you were asking for somebody else, this is medical missionary work. You get it? That this is power? This is what Jesus would ask you to do in order to bless people. And you yourself can be part of it. We had another case. We found out that there were people that had been burned out of their home. Well, that's a big target. That's a big target. Burned out of your home. They had nothing just down the street. So they went home, and now the parents got involved. And the kids said, hey, we want to do something. Okay, fine. So the parents got involved, and they went down to the local Holiday Inn that was doing a refurbishing. That means that they're taking all the old stuff out and putting in all new stuff. They're taking out beds. They're taking out chairs. They're taking out lamps. They're taking out mirrors. They're taking out carpets. All this stuff is going, and they're storing it in the back of the place until they're done. And so the adults would get out with the kids. They'd drive in up in the van, and they'd say to them, hey, you know what? We know that just down the road here, somebody got burned out. We got a bunch of stuff. You're going to probably send to Goodwill. Could we have it? They look, and they see all these kids sitting in the van, looking expectantly at the window. What are they going to say? No? They said, yeah, you can have it. Take your pick. All kinds of stuff. Beds and chairs and couches and mirrors and lights and lamps and all kinds of stuff to refill this home that they are trying to figure out what they're going to do with. That it got burned out. And in the middle of the night, all the kids and the adults now together get there in the middle of the night. Quietly, they drive up in the van with a trailer in the back. And the kids, shh, be quiet, don't say a word. If they hear we're out here, they think we're going to steal something. We're not stealing, we're leaving something. And so we all get out and we put out the chairs. The kids, 2 or 3 of them, pick the chairs up. We get out there, and 2 or 3 of the kids would pick up the lamps and bring it in, and the adults would grab the big bed thing, and they lay it out there, and they would lay it out in like a room. And they would take a big tarp, and we covered it all. And on top of all of that, we put a big note. This is a blessing from your friends. And we backed out. Do you know what that did to those people? To realize somebody cares about me. Kids your age were involved in that. Young people with Jesus were involved in that. I'll tell you one more. Cell group. We had people that didn't have any food. Their cupboards were bare. We had people that had no money in order to buy food. We had lots of kids. Well, we didn't know who they were, or the kids didn't know who they were, but I did. So what we do, the kids started going door to door, finding food. You ever go door to door collecting cans? Well, guess what? Our kids did that like a lot, week after week after. We amassed. If you could look at the big square right here, imagine the big square right here filled with food about this high. And we're not just talking about canned goods. We're talking about 50-pound bags of rice, 50-pound bags of beans. We're talking about etc. And guess what? Some people gave fun stuff like chocolate and that kind of thing. And they just gave and gave. And we filled up our huge back end of this big van filled with stuff. And another vehicle they had that was with us. And then at nighttime, quietly we snuck up. The lights were off. There was one street light down the road. It was dark. All the kids, shh, get out of the van. Don't shut the door loudly. All the kids grab the stuff. Now, they're home. The windows are open. What are we going to do? The kids had to slowly, stealthily, that means secretly, slowly get down below the window and get down where they're watching TV inside. Slowly get down and walk in front of the window where they can put the stuff out on the front porch and just fill the whole porch and walkway all the way down to the driveway. These kids, piece by piece, would take all this bag after bag after bag after bag, and it filled the front area. And these kids had so much fun because every time they went by that window, people would be talking, they'd hear the voices, and like, they're going to hear me, they're going to hear me, I know it's going to hear me, and I'm going to give it away. But all the kids, and they would go. And then all the kids were finished. They piled back into the van. And they looked over the window, watching. And one person, one guy, slipped up to the door, reached out his finger, and hit the doorbell. Ding dong! Whoop! He was gone. Around the back of their house. Boom! Up the hill. Boom! Over a fence. Boom! Through the mud and the gook and the whatever. and there's somebody in the window. Who is that? Look at it. Who is playing doorbell ditch? And then he looked at the front yard. Mom! Dad! Look! And our kids that were 10 years old, 13, etc., they watched them across the street as a family. They put their heads out, they look outside, they shut the door, shut the window. They put their head back outside, they shut the window again. They came to the front door, they opened the door, they looked, they shut the door. They opened the door, Mom, come, look. They came outside, they're looking around, nobody's around, doorbell ditch was successful. It was stealthily done. It was overwhelming abundance because young people, when you go and you collect cans from people at doors telling them you're going to help somebody that has no food, people want to help you help other people. This is the work of Jesus. Medical missionary work that you could do yourself. This is God's plan for the work of young people who have in mind to help others in ways that are bigger than them. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. Now let me ask you a question. Can you go to a door? Ask for some canned goods for somebody? Can you find somebody who has a great need in your church, or maybe better in the community that you don't even know? Maybe just read the paper about somebody who has suffering. They don't even know who you are. And you think that some of your friends could be very stealthful, quiet, and actually maybe secretive, to put stuff in a driveway? Do you think maybe somebody could play doorbell ditch and get away with it? In a good way. You see, this is the work of God. Something that you can do today. This is what you can do today. Now let me tell you, this is not just making stuff up. So there's a very interesting thing. There's a guy by the name of John Tyndall. Ellen White had a vision back in 1910. And she says, you know, with all the work that's been done in the world right now, and what were we doing in the work as Seventh-day Adventists at the time? We were doing evangelistic series. She liked that. We were doing literature evangelism. She liked that. We were doing what we call beneficent work, doing nice things for people. She liked that. You know, we were doing Bible studies, Bible work. She liked that. She said, you know, of all the things that we're doing, we need a new way of ministry has to be done. Well, wait a second. What's wrong with the old stuff? Why don't we do that? She said, we need to do a new kind of ministry. It is the ministry that will take us to the end. And the work that she asked to have done is everybody doing everything at once with kindness towards other people. So that you'll have pastors working with physicians, working with nurses, working with physical therapists, that's all the professionals. That you'll have church people working with cooks, working with literature evangelists, working with people that were interested in Bible studies. They had Bible students, people like your age that were interested in studying the Bible, people that would teach classes. She says this is called team or company evangelism. And you are part of the company. You are actually part of the company. And you can do this work. That was the work that she said would be done to the end of time. And it would close off the work. In fact, a very interesting thing she said. She said, remember John Harvey Kellogg? Some of you, anybody know John Harvey Kellogg? Put your hand up if you know John Harvey Kellogg. All right, he was a doctor. He was at the time the best doctor in the world. If you look at the number of surgeries he did more surgeries of abdominal surgery than anybody in the world at the time. And she said he was amazingly fit as a physician. And she said the Lord is with you. In order to help you when you help people, he's actually guiding your hand. It is not your hand. It is the Lord guiding your hand as a head of the work in medical ministry. You know what she said? At the time, there was a lady who was a missionary, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, and she was not able to find a home to take care of her because as Seventh-day Adventists, we didn't have a place for her. And there were retired pastors, and the retired pastors, when they got old, they gave their lives to Jesus. There was no place for them. And there were orphans, Seventh-day Adventists. Imagine kids your age, their parents died. You know, there was a pandemic back then in 1918, and people would die, whole families would die. And they had no parents. What are you going to do with these kids? And there were no homes for Seventh-day Adventist children to go to where they're Seventh-day Adventists. And they went to homes that were not Adventist. Can you imagine how hard that would be? John Harvey Kellogg started an orphanage by taking money that was given to him by people that were not Seventh-day Adventists, but saw the work that he was doing in the world and said, this is good, I want to be part of this. And they gave him money. And other people gave him money, and he brought in all kinds of money. He built an orphanage, and he filled it with hundreds of young people that didn't have parents. He built a retired pastor's home for people that had given their lives to Jesus and had no place to go. He was doing this kind work. And you know what Ellen White said about this work that he was doing? She said, at the time that this was happening, in the context of what I just told you, this work that he had accomplished, she said, the loud cry has just begun. You know what the loud cry is? The loud cry is a swelling of the message of God's people that goes to the end of time. It swells until it incorporates the entire earth. She said, based on the kind deeds that were being done by John Harvey Kellogg, that the loud cry had begun. My friends, I told you not to despise the day of small beginnings. You can do medical missionary work just of the same kind and quality as John Harvey Kellogg, who made a whole orphanage and made a whole pastor's home, but you can do it in a small size. You can bring food to those who have none. You can be kindness to those who need. You can develop an opportunity to use your influence to help other people pray, like the woman that I saw who had previously not known Jesus and who now prayed for the first time ever. That is the kind of work that you can provide. So I'm part of a program called Total House Spokane. Total House Spokane, the little cards that you have, if you have those little cards, I want you to hold them up. Got the cards? I want to show me your card. I want to see them. Okay. On the front of the card is what we call a QR code. If you have a phone, if you scan the front of that, it will give you a website. That's my website. I recruit young people that are between the ages of 19 and older. I've had one person that was 70 years of age. And I bring them to my town in Spokane, Washington. They're self-supporting missionaries. And I train them in doing 4 things. I train them in Bible work. I train them in health work. I train them in door-to-door work, and I train them in beneficent work. How to use resources that are greater than themselves, and how to do a good work that is bigger than they could ever do by themselves. I train them in those areas, and then I have them work in small groups or teams, where they'll take people that don't know Jesus necessarily and put them into small groups. We call them cell groups, but you can call them anything you want. And out of this, work is done in the community. Now let me tell you about what that work looks like. We train people in door-to-door work. Young people who are between the ages of 19 and probably 25. So they're older than you. But young people were going door to door. And they were going door to door with some literature. And they would pass out literature. And they came to this one door and they knocked. And after knocking at this one door, they didn't get any answer. They knocked again. Now, an adult, I'm all about efficiency. Hey, look, nobody's home. I'm going to go out of here. No. They stayed. They kept knocking. They wouldn't be held back. Finally, the door opened a little bit, and there's a lady inside. A young lady. These were young women. He said, what do you want? And they began to share with her. They began to develop a relationship with her there at the door. They gave her some literature. They said, we'd like to come back. Can we come back? Fine, you can come back. They came back. They didn't come back once. They came back a second, and a third, and a fourth. And pretty soon, they not just came back. This woman was cloistered in her home. She would not come out of her house. She was fearful. She was anxious. She had all kinds of issues. You know, they actually got her out of the home. And guess what? She liked the sunshine. It was nice. And she actually came to church a couple times. So that was cool. And they developed more of a relationship with her. My friends, can you go to a door? Are you able to go to a door and share literature? And when you're at the door sharing literature, can you remember that you're supposed to be friendly? And in friendship, you share back and forth. You'll have adults with you. The adults, you can help engage the adults. You say, hey, Mom, Dad, look at this, or whoever. Look at this person. We want to introduce you to who we just met. Do you think adults can resist that? It's like, no. This woman became a Seventh-day Adventist baptized member of our church. And you know what she told me as a testimony? In tears, she told me, I was hiding in my home, and you came and found me. Who came and found her? Young people. Young people came and found her. Can you go to a door? Can you be friendly? Can you ask people to, engage in a relationship with friends? And you know what? This woman today is a Seventh-day Adventist. Because she had somebody come to her door that was young, younger than me by far, and in the process of this developed a relationship that was powerful to save herself for the last message of today. That's young people that you could work with right now. You could do that. In fact, sometimes it even takes young people like your age to come to your Seventh-day Adventist family and friends and say, come on, what are you hanging out for? You're just going to sit here all day and talk? You want to walk? Let's go. You can do that too. I think probably some of you probably do. And if that's the case, do something that will be good for Jesus. Talk to people who need it. All right, so let me tell you about another one. Our church, I went to the mayor of our city, and I said, tell me where you need medical ministry. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist physician. I pay myself like a pastor. I work with pastors side by side. I have the concept that we get our church to work in the community. Where do you want help? And the mayor looked at me and said, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist physician, I'm on board. Because I know what Adventist medicine does. My job as a physician is to open doors for the church. And it happened. So he takes out his map of the city with his city planner. And he holds his hand over one area of the city and says, I've got all kinds of resources here. I've got transportation, I have food, I have utilities, I have safety, public safety. Over this I have all the same, over this I have the same. But he held his hand right over one area of the city. He says, I don't have things here. He says, in this area, it is the area of highest crime in our city. He said, it's the area where there's no food. It's a food desert. He said it's the area where there is the greatest degree of teenage suicide in the state right now. He put his hand over that area and says, you go there, and I don't care what you do. You can just be friend to people in the neighborhood. I don't care what you do. You go there, and you have my blessing. So, we planted a church in that area. We planted a church in that area. Right down the street, there was a place called Torquato Village. They've renamed it since. Torquato Village was a mobile home park. They had like 180 mobile homes. It was a junk place. You wouldn't want to be there at night. There were horrid stories of children that would be in those homes at night, and they would get disgusted because kids your age would watch their parents shooting up heroin, which was the drug of choice in our area. And they get so sick because they knew their parents were killing themselves. How would you feel if your parents would not resist temptation enough that they would hurt themselves and leave you alone? And so they would get disgusted. They would go outside. But outside, guess what? It's the Northwest. The Pacific Northwest. It's cold out there. It snows. And the deep snow and the cold would be where they were walking. In that area, there was no place they could get shelter. There was no place for kids to gather. So they'd go over to one of their buddies' house. And as the story goes, they walk into the buddy's house, and guess what was happening? The parents were sitting on the couch shooting up heroin. That's the place down the road that we came from. So what did we do? Well, young people. Young people between the ages of 19 and 20-something got together with younger people called Pathfinders. Anybody know what a Pathfinder is? Yeah, a few of you understand Pathfinder. We have a thing in the Northwest called Teen Mission Adventure, where Pathfinders will go for an entire week of spring break. They give away their free vacation. They sacrifice. They have to pay $100 each. When my daughter first came to ask me, she was introducing me to Teen Mission Adventure. She said, Dad, can I have $100? I earned it. It's my bank account. What do you want $100 for? She says, well, I just don't want $100. I want to be gone for a week. What? You've never been gone overnight in your life. What do you want to go overnight for? She said, Dad, there's kids, about 100 of them at a time, and they go all over the Northwest, and they spend the entire vacation doing good things for people. I want to be part of Team Mission Adventure. Well, how do you say no to that? Tell me what the supervision is like. Tell me what it's taken care of. Yeah, Dad, it's good. All right, fine. You can go. Well, Team Mission Adventure this year, half of them came to Takesa Village. And they spent the entire time of their spring break at Takesa Village at 180 different mobile homes. And because the kids were coming, guess what else happened? The church sent people. We're talking professionals. We're talking people who know how to do stuff. And they got there, and these kids, for the entire week, worked to clean up Takesa Village. Now, in Takesa Village, there was not a requirement that you have trash service. And when you have the choice between drugs that you're addicted to and trash service, you choose drugs. And so guess what happened to the trash? It would fill up the whole lot and sometimes overflow the lot into the next lot. And people lived amongst the trash in Takesa Village. And for an entire week, 50 Pathfinders and a strong contingent of adults took 3 dump trucks and were constantly working those dump trucks all week. And the people, when they saw that somebody was cleaning up the mess, found hope. We don't have to live in the junk. We can live here with something that was nice. And so people who hadn't come out in ages into their yard, suddenly cleaning up their yard. So now we have 50 kids that had inspired people in 180 homes to clean up their yard. Because if the kids can do it, why can't I do it? And so they'd be out in the yard cleaning up, and then they started cutting the bushes and pulling stuff away from the house. These were fire traps, my friends, fire traps. Now they were moving junk away from the house. And 3 dump trucks constantly busy for a week. You know how many trash dump runs we took? I'm telling you, we had garbage galore. And with garbage galore, guess what else we had? We had the attention of the entire city. The entire city was wondering what was happening in Takesa Village. And the news people started coming. And the cameras started to roll. And they would ask young people like you, why are you here? Because we want to help. We believe that we need to help people. What are you? We're Pathfinders. They wouldn't use the word Christian church. They wouldn't tell them it was Adventist. But they would say we're a group of people that believe. And because of that, we're here. And the people around us, they knew where we were from. Those Pathfinders put the church on the map for that entire community. And as the news that night rolled, the entire city knew about our Pathfinders, who were willing to sacrifice 1 week of their vacation and $100 of their own savings to come and take care of other people. And because of that, we have Sandy. Sandy knew about us. She heard about us at the church because the Pathfinders put us on the map. Now, here's a question. As Pathfinders, can you rake leaves? As young people, can you rake leaves because you don't belong to Pathfinders? As young people, can you pick up trash? As young people, can you do kind deeds for others in the community? Because that is medical missionary work. And so because of that, young people put our church on the map. Well, more young people. They were walking down the middle of the street on a prayer wall. They were just praying for the community. Asking God to come into the community and send His Holy Spirit into the community. Asking God to come into that community and transfer His power. There's a principle, you guys. It is this. The power of God goes nowhere that the presence of God is not welcome. And these young people were welcoming the presence of God into that hole that this place had become. And the Holy Spirit began to work. And Sandy was out in the yard. He said, "What are you girls doing?" I said, "Well, we're just taking a walk, praying for this community." Praying for this community? Yes. We're asking the Holy Spirit to come into this community and bless it. Really? And she became a friend to the young people. And as she became a friend to the young people, she began to share, "I've got some health needs." The young people said, "Well, we know there's a doctor somewhere inside the church, because I have a clinic that's inside the church." And now she's coming to church because of the young people. And when she came to the church and kept her friendship with the young people, and she developed relationships with the church, she says, "What time do you guys have services on Sunday?" "Well, actually, we have services on Sabbath." "What are you, Jews?" You see, one of the steps necessary to take somebody who doesn't know Jesus and to make them a medical missionary is to help them to know, to be aware of the messenger before they can be aware of the message. And these young people had made this woman aware of the messenger, taking her on a step towards salvation. If you get on that little card I gave you, go on the front QR code, you scan that, you go to the front of my website. On the bottom of that website, you'll see the testimony of a patient, Sandy, who is now a Seventh-day Adventist member of that church because of the young people who were on a prayer walk. My friends, can you do a prayer walk? Can you walk through a city? Don't go in the middle of the street. That's not a good idea. Walk on the sidewalk. Walk with your parents and pray. Can you get people in the church and say, "Hey, we're excited about going out and praying for community because we know what will happen"? The power of God doesn't go where the presence of God is not welcome. We're going to welcome the presence of God into this city. My friends, the power of God will go. And when the power of God goes, He will come because you pray. You know God answers the prayers of children big time. Because parents, adults, often don't have the faith to ask. But you're young enough, you don't know that it can't be done. So that's great, because neither does the Holy Spirit. And you invite Him with His presence to bring His power, and God will descend upon the place you live and walk, because you are doing medical missionary work. And people are members of churches today because of young people like you who did medical missionary work. Can you walk in the middle of the city and pray for it? Show me a hand that somebody can pray. Show me if you're willing to go someplace. If you drive by the Walmart in town, Lord, there's a lot of people in there. They're looking for bargains. Give them the bargain of eternal life, please. Help them to have the presence of God in their life because they don't know that they need it. There are some times when you cannot pray for yourself. You are so down, maybe even ignorant of the Holy Spirit. You need others to pray for you. And it is worthy. God sees that as worthy. And He will listen to those prayers. And He will answer. My friends, this is medical missionary work. Jesus and youth working together to bring salvation to the community you live in. That's what you can do as a medical missionary. Sandy, as a prayer walk. I'll tell you one more story. In the city, because Sandy is now a Seventh-day Adventist. Sandy, because she's a Seventh-day Adventist with children, she knows other children. And across the street and down the road, she comes to the kids, the young people, and says, "I got a problem." Now, she didn't come to the doctor. She didn't come to the pastor. She came to the young people. Because the young people are inviting. They're easy to talk to. She came to the young people and they said, "We got a problem." "What's the problem?" "Lady down the street. She has 5 children. The husband is not in the home. She's trying to work on minimum wage. She can't get enough to pay her bills. She's under stress. And she's a young woman. And she just had a heart attack." Do you know how unusual that is? That is like way unusual for a young woman to have a heart attack. Think about the stress levels, the caffeine she was probably drinking in order to keep her awake enough to be able to go work, to be able to bring home food. And so while she was in there, in the emergency room, they discovered that this woman who just had a heart attack also had breast cancer, advanced. So here's a woman with 5 children, and she has breast cancer as well as a current heart attack. She's going through cardiac rehab. That means that she's got to do a certain level of exercise at a certain way. And guess what? That's expensive. And it takes a lot of effort. Changing her routine when you have nothing, routine is really important. And changing the routine, she also had chemotherapy. And she didn't want to let her 5 kids know that she was sick because she was going to be lost to them soon. Now Sandy, who's down the road, came to our kids and told them that. Well, now the kids came and said, well, what are we going to do? So they came to, where did they think they came to? Do you think they came to a place that had a lot of money and a lot of resources? No, they came to a Sabbath school class of poor people. They came to a Sabbath school. You guys, don't raise your hands, but do you know anybody who's got a Sabbath school filled with a bunch of people that don't have a lot of stuff? I know that kind of Sabbath school. I live in that kind of Sabbath school. They brought that to Sabbath school of all things. So what are we going to do? Well, remember the concept of overwhelming abundance. Remember the idea of doing it anonymously? Okay, so let's go to work. So the young people began to gather food. I have pictures of the refrigerator empty. These children, you know the biggest meal these kids ate in a week was school lunch? I don't know if you've ever been to a public school, but I've been to public school, and school lunch isn't great. It's not terribly. Did you know that in one school, the school lunch vegetable was ketchup? You get my point? It was the pickles on the burger and the ketchup. That was the vegetable that was served to these kids. And it wasn't highly nutritious, and it didn't have a lot of calories. That was the biggest meal that these kids got in the week. And so because of that, these kids ended up hungry at night. They went home and there was no food in the refrigerator or on the shelves. And guess what happened on the weekend? There was no school lunch either. These kids were starving. Because their mother was too tired to work, having chemotherapy, cardiac rehab, and trying not to tell the kids. So what did she do? What did we do? Our Sabbath school went to work. Kids, young people that didn't have anything. They didn't have stuff, so they went to find people that did. And they said, would you help me? They said, well, you're young. Yeah, I'll help you if you're helping somebody else. You're not asking for this for yourself. You want to help somebody else? I'm in. And so we began to collect food, and food, and food, and food. I've got pictures of it lining the hallway of the church. I have pictures of it filling the Sabbath school room floor. I have pictures of it everywhere, boxing. I have pictures of tables filled from here to here, and as far as filled with food. And we wanted to do this anonymously. We wanted to deliver the goods, drop the bomb, make it so that it could help this family. So the concept was to do it anonymously. How do you take that kind of food and do it anonymously? We called the local fire department. Hey guys, can you make a food delivery for us? Yeah, fine, I'll send it to somebody. He walks in, he says, you got a basket? One guy. He says, you got a basket? He says, well, sort of. Come take a look. And he looked, and he looked again, gets on his radio, station 21, we need backup. They sent 2 trucks, one a Suburban, one a pickup. They filled them both. Front to back, side to side, top to bottom, they filled them both. Then they sent the ladder truck. And the ladder truck did the escort. And it went down the road, and it turned, and it went down the other road, and turned, and stood in front of the house, and the kids come up the window. What's going on? What's going on? And these 5 firemen, trip after trip after trip after trip. And the mother was standing in the hallway going, oh, and the kids, Mom, look, it's food. And they even said shirts, and they got some goodies, look at the goodies. And they filled that home, and the mom was in tears. I have photos of that family. with the 5 fire department guys behind him and the 5 children in front, and tears of the mother. They filled that house with food. And the adults turned on people that knew how to make this happen ongoing, so it wasn't a one-time deal. They connected to this woman to help so she could have food for her kids even when she was sick. Who started that work? The young people. Now the woman didn't know where it all came from. She didn't know where it came from. But guess who did know? The fire department. And guess what? The fire department has leaders in the community associated with it. And now the kids had now influenced the leaders in the community to know that that church was on the map. And it had something to do for the community. My friends, this is young people your age helping, and those just a little older than you, and your parents. You can be the influence that takes this medical missionary work onward. This was God's vision when Ellen White had it, to take the beneficent work out. The loud cry had begun, and that was in the 1900s. Guess what? This is 2022. You think that we might have some work to do? We know that the last work to be done on earth is the medical missionary work, and it doesn't mean you have to have a license in medicine to do it. All that I have just told you about is medical missionary work. And we also know that the last work to be done will have a strong component of the youth working in it. You, because Jesus, when he started the work on earth, he started it with young people between the ages of 15 and 22. If you doubt that, come talk to me. I'll show you. I'll show you why I believe that. And so you have the opportunity, you guys, to make work done. This is not rocket science. You don't need a degree. This is something that you can do right now, this moment, the way you are, with the resources you have. You just need the vision that it can be done. And if you get the vision to recognize people will help you when you try to help others. And God listens to your prayers. To recognize that's all he wants, because the presence of God goes nowhere. The power of God goes nowhere where the presence of God is not welcome. You can bring that yourself, because God hears the prayers of children. I want to pray that each one of you, every one of you, will decide to be a medical missionary. Ellen White says that every member of the church is supposed to be a medical missionary. And in the way that I've just described to you, that is the power that God will bring to his people through you. Through you. If you will be a medical missionary, God will bring that to your church. He's called you. He's called you to make the decision that that's what you will do. I want everybody to stand up, please. I want you to bow your head. And I don't want to see any hands, but I want you to speak to God. And I want you to share with God whether you are willing to use the blessings that he has given you for medical missionary work today, next week, next year, while you're in school, when you come out of school. Close your eyes quietly. I'm going to give you just a few seconds to speak to Jesus, because he hears your prayers. Please talk to him, whatever you decide. I ask you, I beg you, as members of my church, commit yourselves to him in this way. Dear Father in heaven, I just pray that you will hear the prayers of these young people. I pray that you will hear them and register them in heaven and have the angels sing, because they have committed themselves to you. And if there are some that are afraid, Lord, I pray that you encourage them to know that you do not despise the small beginnings, but you are willing to come alongside them and lift them up too, so that they also can become medical missionaries. I pray all of us, Lord, will listen to you and help us to have the faith of little children, the strength, Lord, that comes from asking your presence, and therefore we receive your power. Give your power to these young people now. In this gentle way, we pray in Jesus Christ. Amen. You may be seated.